Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 286 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy I, Andy's mom. So today's episode was supposed to be a replay of the live stream that we would have done a couple of days ago, earlier this week. But Gwen is very sick. Gwen has influenza A, and she says she's the sickest she's met in 20 years. And obviously, she was not up to doing a live stream. So I told her, no worries, I will just wing it. So my winging it is consisting of doing a couple of different things. First of all, I decided to give Betty a call. Betty and Kyle, are the people who arranged that book, that anthology that I'm a part of. So that, again, is coming out on March 19th. So make sure to watch my social media. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll be able to get links for that because that book is going to come out on March 19th. And we want everyone to go out and get their electronic copies on March 19th. So we're going to talk quite a bit about the book for the first 15 or 20 minutes. And then the second half, I coerced Eric into coming on the podcast with me and giving some perspective on just some different questions that people have written in to me. So it's great. I love doing podcasts with Eric. It's one of my favorite things, actually. So I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing from that. So right now, this is kind of just a Always Andy's Mom potpourri day today. So sit back and enjoy listening to first Betty and then Eric and I talking about various topics. Thank you so much, Betty, for agreeing to kind of help fill in here a little bit of time for us.
Of course, I'm delighted to.
Yeah, well, I'm excited too because I really was planning on talking about the book because it's coming out soon.
I know, it's just a little over 2 weeks, so.
I know, it's kind of crazy. So anyway, I'm just going to let you talk about this wonderful Threads of Gold book that I get to be a part of. And it was kind of your and your husband's little project. And anyway, so how did it all start? And obviously to remind all of you, Betty's been on the show before. I can't remember what number you were. Do you remember what number you were?
I could look it up, but I don't remember.
I'll look it up. And I'll announce it there too. But Betty and Kyle were both on talking about their daughter Ella, and they started an organization in her memory. And you have Ella's umbrella, and then so talk about that, and then talk about how the book kind of came to be.
Yeah, it's all sort of tied together. So,
right.
For those of you who haven't listened to our story, the very abbreviated version is that my husband and I, our first child, she was born healthy and normal, and she had her whole first year of life, and we checked all the boxes with all of her doctor's visits, and we thought we were in a good spot. And right after her first birthday, she got a little bit of what we thought was a cold, and then we think she wasn't getting better, so we took her in, and it turned out that she was in heart failure, and it really took us by surprise. We had no idea. Things escalated very quickly, and she passed away on my husband's 30th birthday. She was 13 months old, and it shocked us to our core, especially since she was our only child, and we just went from like our whole world revolving around this tiny human to having empty car seats and an empty crib, and it just felt like someone pulled a rug out from underneath us. So, as often happens in situations like this, people had no idea what to say to us. A lot of folks said, oh, protect your marriage because tragedies tend to rip marriages apart. And Kyle and I were like, great. We do not sign up for that. We
Yeah,
don't know a whole
right.
lot about handling grief of this magnitude, but we do know that we don't want our daughter's legacy to be ripping us apart as humans or as a couple. We want her legacy to make us the strongest versions of ourselves. And we want her legacy to make the world a better place. And so we really started leaning into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel like there was kind of a hunkering down in that. Like,
Yeah.
something good is going to come out of this. Her life was not for nothing.
Well,
And
I remember even the night Andy died, we are still at the hospital because Peter was hospitalized, and I remember Eric turning to me and saying, "This will not break us."
yes,
Like it was a decision we made really hours after Andy's death that like this isn't going to happen to us, because you do hear these horror stories about how it could break a couple, and you just didn't want
Yeah.
that to be you.
Exactly. And I think someone reflected back to me at one point that this moment that we had with losing Ella made us feel so powerless.
Yeah.
And we have now realized, looking back on it, that moment was also the source of tremendous empowerment, because it caused us to say, hey, we can't change this one thing that we wish we could change, but there are other things that we do have power to change. And those are the things that we're going to pour ourselves into. And so we started filling gaps. I mean, we had no idea. You obviously, as a doctor, know that heart defects are like one of the most common birth-related issues
for
that
sure.
result in pediatric death.
Mm-hmm.
We just had no idea. I mean, it's like when you buy a car and you start to see other cars like that on the highway. We were like, oh my gosh, we have to keep this from happening to other kids. And so we started by just hosting a trivia night. And
Which I've been to, by the way. 4 years
you
ago,
have.
I was at your trivia night. Yep.
Yeah, our next one, if anyone who watches or listens to your podcast is in the St. Louis area, we have one coming up on April 5th. And it's going to be a blast. It's a month away. But
no, it was very fun. It was cool. It was huge. There's a ton of people.
yeah.
There are a ton of people there. Yeah.
And we always joke around that it's kind of a mashup between a birthday party and a fundraiser. So our trivia nights, because we have so intentionally poured our attention, and also like, man, it's a celebration of Ella's life and the fact that we're still carrying her with us into the future. And it's also doing something good for other families. Like, maybe obviously we can't have our daughter back, but if we could keep what happened to Ella from happening to other kids, man, that's a silver lining we can get behind. And so can other people. So it's just this very positive, fun environment. And we had so much success with that after our first year that we're like, I guess we should do it again. People kept asking us, like, are you going to do that again? That was great. So then we did it again, and it got bigger, and we had to move to a bigger space, and we did it again, and it got bigger. And we were like, wow, we're really having a lot of positive traction with this, and able to donate the money to pediatric heart research. Well, then someone asked, have you ever considered that there are other ways that you can go about protecting kids from dying from heart issues? And one of them would be to fund new technological advancements. And this was actually Jen Hinkle, another one of the authors in our book. She runs a nonprofit called the Ollie Hinkle Heart Foundation. And she said, we get approached all the time with new innovative heart technologies. And we're just one small nonprofit. But she said, I'm starting to realize there are other people out there in a similar boat. And if we link arms and we have that same goal of saving kids' lives, we could do a whole lot more if we work together. And we thought, well, that sounds like a great idea. However, we have no way to write you a check because we don't have a tax ID number. At this point, we were just giving 100% of the proceeds to Children's Hospital to fund the research. And she said, well, it sounds like you need to set up a nonprofit then.
Yeah.
And like, we thought about it, we looked into it, and then we decided, you know what? We want to do that. So that's where we founded Ella's Umbrella. And oh my gosh, I wonder if I can tell you this without crying. So we just had a meeting last month with our first technology that we're partnering to help support. And it's a company called HeartPoint Global, and they have developed a stent, and it So the reason why Ella died is because she had dilated cardiomyopathy. Her heart muscle got too big, was not effectively able to pump the blood to her body. I'm not a doctor. You could explain this better than me. However, from what I understand, there are 3 treatment options when a child has dilated cardiomyopathy. And one of them is to give oral medication to try to treat it and the symptoms and help the inflammation in the heart muscle go down. The next one, which is really extreme, is to do a heart transplant, which is
Right.
what Ella really needed. But we didn't know that at the time. And they were treating her with oral medication and hoping that she would get better. And obviously she did not. The third thing, if there's not a transplant available, they can do banding, which is that has like a 30% mortality rate and just very dangerous surgery. Doctors don't want to do it. Not ideal. But what this IntelliStent is designed to do, it can be placed with a catheter. And so it can reduce the pressure on the heart and it grows with the child, unlike banding.
Wow.
Yes, it
That's
is.
amazing.
It's phenomenal. So they showed me an animation of this thing, of how they place it. And they said, we're bringing it, we're starting in the US because the FDA is like the gold standard of regulations. And so if we can get it through all of their checks and balances and get it approved by the FDA, we will have no problem going anywhere we want with it. And so as they were showing me this animation of how they place it and how it potentially could have saved Ella's life, I just literally had tears rolling down my face because I was like,
Yeah.
man, this is what it's all about. If this technology had existed, my daughter might not have died. She definitely would have been a candidate for it. And man, that just gives me goosebumps. Like,
Right.
I cannot undo the past, but I can change the future. And that is what we're doing. So the vision of our nonprofit is to keep kids' hearts beating. And that is one big important piece of our story that is so exciting. The other piece of our story, which is why you invited me to talk tonight,
Yes.
is
Uh-huh.
the anthology. So because we recognized that there was this sucking void of things for people to say to us right after our tragedy, like it just creates this super polarizing situation where folks want to be supportive, but they have no idea what to say.
Yeah.
And Kyle and I started to realize early on that even though that whole situation is really uncomfortable and isolating, Ella gave us a gift of being able to, when awful things happen and no one else knows what to say, we have something to say
Yeah.
because I mean, as you know, you've lived it. And so we have this empathy. It's like something that I would never choose to have. However, it's a gift and I can connect with people in a way that other people can't connect with folks. And so initially, Kyle and I started getting connected with others who had been through tragedies, a lot of them child loss.
Yes.
But really, honestly, I mean, someone in our subdivision lost their father and everyone reached out to Kyle and I and said, what should we buy for her to, like, as a subdivision, as a gift, as her friends? We just kind of became accidental experts on grief and supporting people through grief. And the more we kind of leaned into that and became this resource, we started realizing, like, this is a beautiful part of our daughter's legacy. And we don't want to take that for granted, but we can't take everyone to dinner and we don't live in everyone's subdivision. So how do we take some of these learnings and distill them in a way that is more broadly shareable with folks? Because a lot of people are going through just really broken moments and they just need a friend. So we wrote a book called Unraveled: When Loss Changes Everything. And that book has opened so many doors, for us to see beautiful silver linings that have come out of Ella's story and help people in ways that we never could have imagined. It also has allowed us to connect with so many amazing folks. And some of it came out of the book. Some of it came out of just like you, our paths crossed through a mutual connection.
Yep.
And what we started realizing is we don't even in our book, we said we don't claim to have all the answers on grief. Super complicated, and every human is different. And actually, like, I might need a different thing in the morning than I do at night. So,
Right.
like, it is super complex, and I do not sign up for spelling all of that out. However, man, we have a network of people who have just lived through some incredible things and have incredible perspective on the topic of grief. And with our experience of having published a book, we sort of became a resource. A number of folks started mentioning to us, like, oh man, I would love to write a book, but I just don't even know the first place to start. Or I have something that I want to share, but I don't think it's a whole book. And I don't know what to do with it. So the more we kept hearing this and thinking about it, we were like, you know what? We should produce an anthology. And it has become now almost like some of the most inspirational people that we have crossed paths with have taken whatever it is that they have experienced, and a number of them are child loss, such as yourself. Um, but there's also divorce and depression, which is really like a loss of self. Someone wrote a chapter on that. There's a significant job loss, life-altering things that people would not choose for themselves. And what we've asked these authors to do is say, man, if you were walking alongside someone who is experiencing something like what you experienced, what would you want them to know? And now we have this, it's almost like 26 TED Talks from the most inspiring people that we know, all put into one book. And even just as a compiler, I am fundamentally changed by having read through all these stories and listened to all this perspective. So I could not be more excited. That's the anthology. It's called Threads of Gold, and March 19th is the launch date of the book.
Yes. And I was honored when you asked me to be a part of it, and it's really been a thrill, really, to be able to see this coming to fruition, and just kind of the stepwise, very, very organized. I mean, it was very organized from beginning to end, kind of what we had and where certain deadlines were and all of this. And it was great, actually. It was really great for me to kind of think, what do I want to say? What do I want to say? And just not that many pages, but certainly longer than I do on my little weekly writings that I do. But just what grief has done to me and what you kind of learn through it. And what's funny is I ended up where I ended up landing was on talking about how our stories all shape us into who we are. And it was funny because I thought, and that's really what this anthology is doing too, is it's showing each of those 26 little chapters, they changed people. They changed people in ways that they couldn't have imagined before, and that you don't always see from the outside. So that's why it just fit really well for me, and I'm really excited to be a part of it, and can't wait for the launch date that is just right around the corner.
Yeah, I am delighted to share this project with the world, because I think no matter who you are, what you've experienced, I mean, we all kind of have places of brokenness in life. And I think there is relatable content for anyone in the book. So, and what you've said, like, loss requires you, it kind of stops you in your tracks, and it requires you to kind of rethink what you've learned up to this point that's brought you here. And then it shapes you differently for moving forward. It is truly unique, but also beautiful. And
Right.
so,
And that's why I love too the title being Threads of Gold, because you think about these horrible tragedies that have happened, but there can be little pieces of gold in them too. And as horrible as losing Andy was and continues to be, I mean, I still cry a lot. I cried today. I mean, this is something that hurts always. But do I think I am a better person now than I was 6.5 years ago? Yeah, I do actually. And that doesn't mean I don't wish that you could take it back. And just like you talking about, you know, all of this heart research and this procedure that Ella could have had. I mean, you're thinking, obviously, as you're hearing this, you're thinking, wow, that would have been amazing. It would be amazing to get her back. But we can't have those things back. But we make the best out of kind of our futures moving forward and being able to help other people and be with other people.
Exactly. Yeah, I would give anything to have my daughter, but the next best thing is keeping another parent from having to say that. So, and I think this anthology is exactly that in book form, where it's kind of like no one would choose these things that they've written about, but the best thing you can do is take what you've learned and help somebody else.
Help
And
somebody who
so,
may be experiencing the same thing, right? So obviously with
exactly.
Ella's umbrella and the heart research, you're trying to prevent that from happening. The book is more for people who may find themselves in the midst of it and
Exactly.
knowing that there still is hope for the future and can be beauty in your future.
Absolutely. Yeah. But one thing that I'll maybe leave you with is the reason why we chose the title that we chose is actually it's based on the very end of our Unraveled book. And in the last section, as we're kind of wrapping up what we would say to someone who is grieving, we talk about this idea of golden threads. Actually, the last section header is golden threads of our Unraveled book. And it says, we want to leave you with something that's resonated with us. In Japan, there is an ancient art form called kintsugi. The word kintsugi literally translates to golden joinery. This art form takes broken pottery and repairs it with gold. It celebrates the idea that there is tremendous beauty in the broken. Instead of hiding the cracks, the gold highlights them as a focal point. The result is a stunning new piece of artwork that is even more valuable than before it was damaged. And then we talk about how our tragedy was obviously crushing, but not crushing in a way that destroyed us. When we look at our lives now, we will always see the cracks. There's no disguising the cracks, but we are going to continue to mend them with gold and create something that is even more valuable. We often say that our lives were not destroyed when we lost Ella. They were enriched because we had her at all. So the very last part of this book, our hopes for the reader are that when they look at all the miles they've traveled, they may never forget the brokenness that's given them strength. And perhaps above all, we hope that you may truly be able to appreciate the beauty and the threads of gold that hold all the pieces together.
Oh,
So that's why we
well,
named it
thank
Threads of
you.
Gold. Yeah,
Thank you. That's just beautiful. And thanks again for coming on and talking about it even more.
of course.
Welcome to the second half of episode 286. In this episode, I have coerced Eric into helping me out here. So if you all pay attention on social media, you obviously know that Gwen is sick. I mentioned that in the introduction, but poor Eric got stuck doing another podcast episode, which for him is a lot because I don't know that I've mentioned this before, but Eric does a Michigan State basketball podcast. And let me tell you, he does a lot of podcasts. So right now, basketball has 2 games a week. They do a pregame and a postgame show, each of which is about an hour. They will do special episodes on recruiting. The other night, he recorded one on the NCAA tournament and tournament selection, like seating, what the seating would be. So this guy is already doing on average about 5 podcasts a week. And I just made him do another one. So, hey, thanks.
Anything, yeah, for the team, for sure. Yeah.
Anything for the team. So, obviously Gwen is sick, and we were supposed to do something on kind of life's transitions and how when you're transitioning through different events kind of in your life while you're grieving, that can really have a big impact on how you affect those things. And I don't want to let go of that entirely. this will be a topic that maybe we talk about the next time she is on. So know that if you submitted answers to those, we will get to that. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. What I did today was I asked people, first of all, on Facebook, do you have any questions that you would have for Eric or me? So we would have something to talk about. And I got one person. One person. I had 7 comments. Almost all the comments were, get better, Gwen. And even this comment was also, get better, Gwen. So we all want Gwen to get better. But the comment had to do with our marriage and how this grief journey kind of that we've been on has affected our marriage. Because we've talked about it early on and how it may have affected our marriage early on. But this was more, now we're 6 years in now. And do we feel like kind of our marriage is different, and maybe what impact that's had on our marriage and our communication and just some other kinds of thoughts. So, comments?
I do have. I guess I would say that the marriage is different, for sure. But I think it would have been different had nothing happened.
Sure.
After 6 years. So I know people ask about how do you get through these sorts of things, and with the big giant stress of it, and I've always commented, maybe it's not fair that it is a stress on your marriage, but similar to having a birth of a child, having a sort of life event occur. Mm-hmm. Those are also stressors on your marriage, maybe job issues, money problems, those sorts of things. And so those are all things. They're not as impactful, as bad as losing a child, of course.
And maybe not as sudden, some of them too.
Certainly, yeah. Right? Some of them are just as sudden too. It just kind of depends. Mm-hmm. So we're always changing. Everything's changing all the time. And I think sometimes you don't realize it, but with something like what happened with us is certainly life-changing, right? I think the first year was tough because I think you're trying to get through things, and we get through them differently. I think that's always hard. And you don't know how to be supportive and to be helpful. Like many of my really good ideas were not very good ideas. Namely, to tell you to go back to work. That was a really bad idea. It was, though I was quick to admit that I was wrong, which is important. You know, that, okay, I guess that didn't work. Right. I think, so that was, to not be stubborn enough to think that what works for me is best for you. But I think I also knew that inherently that wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. At least that I didn't know the right answer, I guess is what I should say. Like I was like, well, I think maybe this helped me. I think you should try it. And so, but I realized that I was not, that I recognized that I could be wrong, and it was clearly the wrong move. But I think, for me specifically, the first year was hard because you were so angry. Yeah. And you were a very different person. Obviously, you go through stress like this, people are different. But I could deal with grief. I could deal with, like, just the sadness. I could deal with a lot of things. The anger was really hard to deal with because you just weren't yourself. You were a very different person, short, all those sorts of things. And I think, just upset all the time.
It's really funny, too, because I just had our support group this last week. And you know what the topic was? You have no idea what the topic was because you don't participate, but anger. Oh, yeah. The topic was on anger. And I talked about that. I talked about how I was just angry. I just felt angry. But I did say, I don't know that if you asked my coworkers if I was an angry person, if they would have said that.
No, I think you kept it bottled up until you were at home.
Yes. I know. I think I didn't mask it to you, but I think I was better able to mask it in front of other people that I didn't feel as safe around. But I know that you knew, and I knew, and I didn't like me. Yeah. I mean, I didn't like who I had become. And it took really close to a year. I really feel like it was until we had that court date. That court date was a big transition for me that I felt like I was able to let go of a lot of that anger. But that was 10 months. Mm-hmm. 10 months of hanging on to that until I was able to let go of it. So, but that's interesting that you bring that up today when I just admitted to my whole support group that I had that anger for a year until I was able to let go of it. And still there are pieces that you can feel a little bit angry, right? You feel a little bit cheated that Andy didn't get to live the life that he should have, and all of these like little things, but it doesn't affect me in the way it did that first year, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a little bit your personality too, not to be angry, but we always joke that when it comes to like a vacation, you're looking forward to the vacation, you're counting down the days, you're all excited about it. And I'm pretty much the same up until the point we leave the vacation, like, oh, it's time for the vacation, and we go. It drove Andy crazy because I would not get super excited or like all, hyped up about it. But I think that's just a different personality, right? Like, and for you, you saw that court date as some sort of date where things are resolved or something like that. Because as soon as that happened, it seemed like that was...
No, it wasn't that, actually. I mean, you might think it was that. It wasn't that. I didn't know that would happen to me until that day, until I actually hugged that woman. Because I really let go of anger in that courtroom, and I didn't anticipate doing that. It wasn't the like, oh my gosh, I've got to get here and I'm going to hang on and be mad until that thing, because I didn't anticipate being able to let go of it like I was.
Yeah. I guess I thought that's what would happen.
And I didn't.
But maybe that's because I have on the outside. I don't know. Or just...
Well, and you'd never... And then that always ticked me off, too, because you never were angry. And I just couldn't understand how you couldn't be angry, because I felt so much anger. And then I felt more anger because you weren't angry, which was, of course, not fair to you. I mean, that... I shouldn't put my emotions on you. Obviously, here, now I just said the word shouldn't. And I always say, we don't say should and shouldn't. But I shouldn't have like thought about how you should be feeling. I mean, it doesn't, your feelings are your feelings and my feelings are mine. And it's hard. It can be hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was very guilty that I didn't feel anger.
Yeah.
You felt... Yeah. Not because you were, but I'm like, this person just killed my son. I mean, not intentionally.
Right.
But I should be more angry with her than I am.
Right. And I thought you should be more angry with her than you were.
It just was something that I just couldn't manufacture. I mean, I was angry at the situation, I think, but that's different. I mean, I wasn't angry at a specific person. So it was...
It's funny because just today, so, for a while, I couldn't even look at a white BMW without my head about feeling like it was going to explode, because I'd be so angry. And it's funny because I was driving today and I drove past a white BMW and I actually thought to myself, I thought about the fact that it didn't get my blood boiling to look at it anymore. I mean, I thought about it. It was a white BMW. I always think about it a little bit when I see a white BMW, but I didn't get just hot under the collar like I did before.
I mean, I think the other thing that has changed is, I think I always knew on some level that you can't fix everything, right? And I've been actually talking about this video, which if you want to laugh, which I know there's not people listening to your show, but there's a short video called "It's Not About the Nail," and it was probably put out about 10, 15 years ago. And it's just about about the ways, women in general want people to listen to them and hear them and, be with them. And men want to fix whatever the problem is. And sometimes there's not a problem that needs to be fixed or can't be fixed or shouldn't be fixed or whatever.
Right.
And so I think I definitely had a better understanding and appreciation, I suppose is a better word, for not feeling like I had to fix things. And that just like, okay, yeah, this really sucks. You're angry. I get it. I'm not angry, but I can understand why you're angry. But I'm just going to kind of we'll be together and you're just going to be angry or you're going to be sad and it's okay. Like, I was never okay before with you just being sad and, like, I've got to go comfort you. I got to do something. And now I'm like, well, I'm not going to make you unsad. So I'm just going to be, okay, it's okay that you're crying or you're sad and we'll just be together. And, it's okay that you're sad when I'm not sad right now.
Well, I got to tell a funny story. So recently, over the past few weeks, I've talked Eric into going to a trainer with me. Okay, once a week, because I've been going and I want to get in better shape and I want to, take better care of myself because I kind of haven't been doing that since Andy died. So anyway, I talked him into going to this trainer, and we're there the other night, and he's a younger guy, and I didn't know even that he knew that we had a son die, but it turns out he did, and this song comes on. And it's what is it? It's like, I don't know. It's like a song that you would hear at a gym, like a really kind of loud song. Turn down for what? Something I can't remember.
You're asking the wrong person.
I know, you don't know. But anyway, it is the last song that Andy downloaded to my phone. He had Apple Music, and he said, Mom, can I buy this song? It's, really kind of fun song, and it gets him all, cool kind of workout, driving song, whatever. And I said, sure. And so I downloaded this song, and this song comes on. And I just was having a day where I was more emotional, and I started to cry. And I'm supposed to be like pushing this big heavy thing across the gym, and I'm now crying, and he's looking at me, and he's thinking maybe he did something that pushed me too hard, that I'm like crying. Of course I'm not. And I said, I'm sorry, it's this song. It's the last one Andy bought. And suddenly this poor guy goes, Eric, your wife needs you, Eric. So he calls him from the other side of the gym to come over to comfort me. And Eric, you just look at me and you go, I would hug you, but I'm like all sweaty. Which just cracks me up when you said that, because like you knew I didn't really need that. And I even said to him, it's like, it's fine. I don't like need that. It just got me. It's just a song that just in this moment got me. And the tears are close a lot of the time, and little things can put me over. But you making that comment just was like that. You personified that last Monday night when you were like, yeah, I'd hug you, but I'm all sweaty. You're like, you don't want to hug me. And it really, ultimately, would that have made me feel a lot better? Not really. I mean, I just needed like 10 seconds, and then I went and pushed the heavy thing across the room like I was supposed to. And you did make me laugh, which was better, which is always a good thing. Okay. So, and then I was going to say too, I think since Andy died, we really do make an effort to do things with the family even more so. Like, for example, next week, we have the Big Ten basketball tournament. Every year since Andy died, we have gone as a family, anyone who can, has gone to see the Big Ten basketball tournament. And that was a decision that we made, that we were going to do that kind of for Andy and to spend this time together as a family for that. So I think that's a difference. I mean, we didn't do that. We went to basketball games and whatnot, but I think we make more of an effort to try to spend time together in more special ways than maybe we would have before.
Yeah, and I say in just general too, just more open, just communicating.
Yeah,
better.
Right. I think communication better.
So,
okay.
That's different.
So this kind of goes into that a little bit. So when we had this support group about anger, I said at the end, so Gwen is sick. I have nothing to talk about. I'm going to ask Eric to come on. What are some questions that you might have for Eric? And they came up with some great ones. So
I did not realize these questions were sitting right by the computer.
I know. That's funny. What's funny is I had these questions all written out by the computer. Eric recorded an entire podcast with the notes sitting right here, and he never read the questions because he said last night, should I know the questions ahead of time? And I said, I think maybe not. And then I thought to myself, he probably could have read them if he was paying attention, but you weren't paying attention. So there you go. The first one was why. Well, first of all, the very first one is when you remember how we went to Starlight right away after Andy died. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was only like 3 weeks after Andy died. We went to the first support group. I'm just wondering if you remember, because you might not remember. When we went to the first one, did you think this is going to be really helpful for me? Or did you go thinking it might be helpful for me and for the other kids? Or do you not remember?
I thought it'd be potentially helpful for the kids. But we had met with Gwen before then.
Yeah, we met with Gwen once.
So, I mean, I thought it'd be helpful for us. I don't think it was specifically just you.
Okay.
But I would say I didn't worry as much about myself.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's kind of always how I always am. I don't worry about myself as much. I'm like, whatever I can get through, whatever it is. But
because I've said on the podcast before that when we went to that first one, and I was thinking the whole time, I don't belong here. I don't want to be here. I wish we weren't here. The kids, somehow we got in the car before you did. we were talking, you and I, afterwards, and you said that was great. That was really good for us to go to. And then somehow you didn't get in the car with the kids and I, and Peter and Katie and I got in the car, and they were like, yeah, that was not good. And I said, yeah, I didn't really like it either, but Dad really did, so we're coming back. So that's what the decision that we made, that we then decided we were going back for you. And then ultimately, I think 3 of the 4 of us found it really helpful. I would say Peter never really found it helpful because there was never another middle school age boy that had gone through a sibling loss. There was maybe another middle school boy whose dad died or something, and everybody else was all middle school girls, and it just didn't fit for him. And I really don't think it was the support group so much that didn't fit. It was just that particular group. But, you know, for our daughter, it was really helpful. She ended up inviting a friend whose mother died. You and I both found it helpful, but initially it was just you. But the question was, why are men in general resistant to support groups?
Why in general?
Why is it? So when I have a support group, like I've got these for a while I had 2 support groups. Now I'm just doing the morning one, not the evening one. And I do have, like, there are like 2 men signed up for the evening one. The day one, I've never had a man. I mean, it is 95% women. Yeah. And all these people that I talk to, they all say, like, yeah, we go to the support group, it's all women. Somebody said, I started my own support group, and I said it is for parents, and the only people I have show up are moms.
Right.
So do you have any insight on that?
I mean, nothing profound. It's aside from just, in general, I don't think men like talking about stuff like that, and I don't know. I mean, I think that's mostly what it is. It's just you don't really talk about those sorts of things. Like even with your friends and stuff, you don't really talk about that kind of stuff usually.
And so you just think it's just basic uncomfortableness?
Yeah, I think it's just discomfort. I think it is. At least for me. So, and anytime in a small group, like when we've done the Bible studies, small groups, it's like am I going to look stupid, or we're talking about stuff that maybe is deeper and personal, and I don't know these people that well, and is this something that I should disclose? I don't know. I just feel uncomfortable sharing those sorts of thoughts. I mean, I didn't really say much of those support meetings.
No.
I mean, for me, it was helpful just seeing that other people had survived. That's really, I mean, that's what that first day, I'm like, hey, these people are actually, they've been through different things, but all kind of similar in some respects. They lost their kids, and they're still
walking around. Yeah,
they drove here, they got home, they're a couple years out. Sounds like they're employed. I mean, like they're moving on with life, and so you can actually get this, and also just knowing you're not the only person. I mean, it was that too, because when it happens, I didn't know anyone whose kid had died.
Yeah.
So it seems super duper rare, like it's something that just almost never happens, right? And it doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough, obviously, that you know there's plenty of people, and now you hear about it, and maybe just now you just think about it more when you hear some story. But I think it was that. It was, for me, it was just that there are other people who've gone through it and have survived, and like maybe you'll get some idea of how they made it through, or at least I feel like totally numb. Is that normal? Right. But I didn't need to talk to people about it. I didn't need to actually share. But I think when you expect to go to a support group, the expectation is, or at least the concern is, that you have to contribute and participate a lot. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, well, that clearly was not the case. You don't have to. But at some point, I felt comfortable with, we knew enough of the people there. They seemed okay, and so I could talk.
Well, and I have certainly noticed that quite a bit too. First of all, I'm going to go back to a support group I had a couple ago. The first one that I actually had men in, we had 3 couples, and one of the men participated quite a bit, one of them a little bit, and one of them I didn't even see. Like, he was sitting off camera, and his wife was there, and you sort of knew he was there, but he never said anything. But that's not saying that it wasn't helpful to him. It certainly might have been.
Right.
And I have to say too, I have now gotten so I accept people just not saying anything a lot more. Yeah. Because I did, as a facilitator, feel pressure. Like, oh my word, if they're not contributing, they're not getting anything out of it.
Right,
I need
right.
them to be able to feel comfortable. If they're not saying anything, they're probably uncomfortable. And I put too much pressure on myself. And I've now gotten to the point where, like, sometimes you just need to listen. And if you just need to listen and you're not going to say anything, that's okay. And I've been doing it long enough to know that sometimes it takes 3 or 4 sessions for somebody to really start opening up and talking. And then I feel great when it hits that 3rd session and now they're contributing. But it's just, I think in general it just depends on the person, but you're right in that men might have a little higher threshold or something to feel comfortable.
Yeah, and you don't need to talk about it to work things through sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and then the follow-up question to that then was, how do I get my husband to get help? And I don't know that there's a good answer for that either. Somebody had shared that they had gone to an event, like a weekend thing with a family, and she said, and my husband was a jerk the whole time. He was just acting horrible because he didn't want to be there, and I made him go, and it was horrible. But she feels like he clearly needs help because he's probably like me when I went through that anger phase. There are people, there can be dads that maybe are just like angry and not even the same person they were. And how do you help them realize that it might be good to get some help because you're not who you should be?
Yeah. Well, I think that comes down to what's going to be most helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't know necessarily that a support group is the most helpful
thing. No, not
thing.
necessarily.
And that's the tricky thing. Like, what is it? Maybe it's just someone, maybe they need to watch like a video or a movie or something about, or not movie, maybe like some sort of video series about it.
I was going to say Gwen has that great video series. Maybe that would be an option. Buy the video series, say, hey, I just need you to watch this.
Because really, if you get to a point where you're not comfortable talking about this sort of stuff, if you're thrown into a situation where people are talking about this sort of stuff, you're going to feel like, well, the expectation is for me to open up, cry in front of everyone, all this sort of thing that I don't feel comfortable doing. And so I'm going to be very defensive about it and might be a jerk to everyone in order to sort of not have – so people don't bug me and like expect – they're like, I don't want the guy to talk because he's a jerk or whatever.
Right.
So there's all kinds of other secondary reasons that people might be that way. So I don't know that necessarily – I think, the important thing maybe would be that just say if you're going to say we should go do whatever, X, Y, Z, I lay down the groundwork that – you don't have to participate. You don't have to actually say a word. You don't have to become friends with the other people, other couples or anything, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But like even if you were to go to a group like that and you were to go and hang out and you're with some other guy there and you could commiserate and like, this kind of sucks.
Yeah.
What do you think about, and then maybe you talk sports or something like that. But even that alone, just the fact that here's a person who's lost their child and they are following sports or they're following, something else that they're still, there's some other part of life that like totally consumed by the grief of the one thing. That alone is helpful. And
I thought even, remember when we did that game night? We were in our group, it was just 3 couples from our grief group. We did a game night. We just played games and it was really nice. It was really nice.
Yeah.
And it was totally different kind of setting,
but there was no agenda.
No,
there was not like, hey, we got to make sure we talk about our kids for 20 minutes, or we all kind of knew the story, like we all lost kids.
Yeah, well, and we were in support group together.
Right. So that was obvious, a baseline, and they were similar age-ish, so that we could kind of relate on some level too.
Right.
But it was helpful because I think, one of the things that's really tough, especially after you lose a kid, I think the first year is the worst, maybe even the second, is the subject of what are the kids up to, or what are all these all the questions you're afraid to get asked.
Yes.
You're afraid to answer. You're afraid to ask other people. You don't have to worry about that with people because for one thing, if they do ask you,
first of all, they know that one of them is not here.
Right.
So
so you don't have to worry about that. That sort of has been broached already.
Yeah.
Right. So that's already taken care of. But they, honestly want to know how your other kids are doing. And maybe they're asking questions like how the kids like coping.
Right.
And you can actually talk about that without.
They're all in therapy. They're kind of a hot mess. That is okay and sort of understandable, and that might not be in if you were going to a game night with your coworkers or whatever.
It would absolutely wouldn't be, because there's going to be because as soon as you get to, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be sad eyes. It's awkward for them. It's awkward for you. But now you're like, it's sort of like, in medicine, we can talk about stuff in medicine that you just don't talk about in the public, like about medical conditions, sort of gallows humor, just stuff that
I
just
talk about
people.
poop all the time.
Right.
You
The
do
fact
not
that-
have general conversations about poop with the
exactly.
public. Yes.
People peeing on you, those sorts of things,
Yes.
like babies.
Right.
You can laugh and joke about these things, and you can't do that with the general public. You can't talk about people throwing up or making whatever, because it's gross or whatever. But in medicine, you can joke about this stuff because it just happens all. It just it's a bodily function. It happens just like grief is something that happens. But the fact that you're all gone through that part is sort of off the table. And now what are you doing? Well, you're just hanging out and just maybe not doing anything, or maybe you're asking like, how's your kid doing? He's went to therapy. It wasn't very helpful. He was better off just playing soccer or something. I don't know, just a million things. But I just said the fellowship of just being with people who've been through it, and they're just getting through it, and you realize that everybody just kind of sucks at getting through grief. No one's like an expert, and so I think that that may have been as helpful as sitting in a group talking and crying about stuff, right? I mean,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that can be helpful. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our next question because I don't want to go way over on time. So the next ones kind of go together. So when and how to help kind of educate people, especially when they make insensitive comments and things like that. So I'm just going to use an example. We had an example from support group that someone had friends visiting, and this woman lost their only child, and all these friends kept talking about how excited they were to go back home so they could see their grandkids. Mm-hmm. And it felt like just a stab in the heart every single time, and it happened again and again and again. And she said nothing. But I'm not sure if that is the right thing. I don't know what the right thing to do is, and whether you can kindly try to educate people a little bit, that because that the problem is, of course, that keeps going on and on and on when you don't address it.
Right. I don't know. There's a good answer.
I know.
I will say, because I'll be honest, when I was so I went back to work a couple months after Andy died, and in the operating room, you talk about pretty much everything. You talk about what's going on in your marriage. You talk about, what you eat, what restaurants you've been to. There are a million things to talk about. And obviously, things come up like, hey, what kind of costume is your kid going to have? And then
for Halloween, I was going to say that. I remember that very specifically because I remember how bothered you were by that.
Well,
because it was again and again. Because of course, when you're in the operating room, you're working with different nurses and different surgeons every day, and for quite a few days, that was the topic on what's your kid going to wear for their Halloween costume,
or back to school. I mean, a million things that go on. But I guess I got to I would say that you can't tell people not to talk about it if it's insensitive. And this is just my opinion. Just take it for what it's worth. Because because the problem is you can't tell people not to talk about life, I think.
Right.
Because then they're going to be walking on eggshells forever because they're not going to know what they can or can't talk about. I think for me, so the way I sort of framed it in my mind is, instead of looking at it as it's so terrible they're talking about their kids getting Halloween, they're talking about petty things like their kids crying or something like that, and they can't get to sleep. Boy, I'd love to just hug my kid and have him cry once more, right? I mean, those are hard to talk about. But if people are being normal around me, talking about life, I mean, life is like, moving forward, there's hope, there's for the future, there's talking about. I felt like that was more helpful to me in the end. It was hard. It was very hard hearing people talk about those sorts of things. And I would sort of tune them out. There's no question at times. But I was more appreciative that they felt comfortable enough to talk about dumb life stuff that is, actually real in their life and is important. Because if I were to try and tell them what is okay and not okay, well, that's going to vary from day to day with me. It's going to, and what what bothers me yesterday is no longer going to bother me anymore. And so at some point I thought I just need to kind of just let it kind of go. There are certain things people can say to you, like to try and comfort you. Then you can say, well, that's, not helpful. But if they're just talking about just stuff, I don't know. I mean, I think I think that's just, you just have to kind of accept it, which is maybe not the right answer, maybe not the answer you want.
Yeah, I don't know. I do agree with you, especially when I have people that are saying something to try to comfort me, especially if they say, I'm not sure that was the right thing to say. If they have a degree of, I don't know, then that's when I do take an opportunity to do that. I mean, I remember somebody saying, this must be something, we were doing something for Andy, this must be bittersweet for you. And I said, and she said, I don't know if that's the right word. And I said, not really, because there's no sweetness to it yet.
Yeah.
But I was able to say it in a nice way that, like, that wasn't quite the right thing to say. This would be better. But it was only because she seemed really open to the fact that I'm not sure this was right. And then I could kind of help her on that with something that might have been a little more right for me. But it is different than the ones just talking about life in general. Although I do have to say, you have to protect your heart a little bit, though, if it goes again and again and again, then sometimes saying something, but it's hard to know how to say it, because exactly, you don't want to hurt them. But
change the subject, hard. Extricate yourself. I think those are things like, leave if you can.
Yeah.
And just go.
But when they're, if they've come to visit you at your home, I mean, what do you do?
Go to the kitchen, grab some food, and start talking about cheese or something else. I mean,
yeah.
I don't say flippantly, because I realize it's hard, but to tell people that to not talk about things, I think is really hard to do, and I think it's going to make people less likely to want to open up, because at some point you're going to feel okay enough for them to come over again or whatever. And now they're going to feel uncomfortable coming over again because, well, last time we were there, boy, that was awkward or something. And I don't know. I mean,
it's hard.
Yeah,
I feel like we differ a little bit, because I do feel like sometimes you need to protect yourself a little bit more and say, and just be a little more honest about, like, I just can't handle talking about that right now, or something.
Yeah, you could maybe you just find a phrase like. Well,
like,
do you think we can talk about something else?
I'm sure that's really hard, but I just can't. I can't go there right now. That's too difficult for me. I mean, you want them to obviously be able to talk to you, but it's just so incredibly painful sometimes. I mean, I remember one time I got just so tired of people complaining about COVID. Oh my gosh. I couldn't. And somebody was like saying something about faking a smile and whatever, and she just was going on and just so whiny. And I looked at her and I said, well, I've been faking it for 2 years. And I mean, and it probably wasn't the kindest thing in the world to say, but it wasn't super mean. It was just kind of like, think about it just a second. Like, this every day is hard, or, maybe then they talk about the grandchildren, and maybe you do say, I get that. Gosh, I miss so-and-so more than I can even think. Something to make them just pause for a second. Because I think that comment for me to just say, I've been faking it for 2 years, it made her go, oh my gosh, she has been faking it for 2 years, and probably I should stop the whiny voice, right? So, and maybe a little bit of a reminder that, gosh, I know how it is to miss someone because I live that every day, might make them go, but not in a mean way, obviously.
But I mean, that's an opportunity to talk about them too.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
I mean, and then, you might make things a little awkward, but that's okay, because they are the ones who made it awkward too to begin with. So, yeah, maybe that's an opportunity to say, I miss so-and-so because we used to go to the baseball games. I really miss doing that. And that gives you an opportunity to talk about them. And then, you're part of the conversation. It's not really that different in some respects than someone who's, across the ocean they're not seeing for 5 years.
Right. I mean, it's just the fact that you can see them in 5 years.
Right.
And which is going to be, but right. They don't think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. One last thing. Oh, we better get going. So one last thing was, somebody wrote in that it was, and in fact, I think it's tomorrow now, so it'll be the day that this is released, is the 2-year anniversary of their child's death. So how do we get through the anniversaries and the big days?
Well, I think the way you get through any day is the first answer, which is kind of, you get up, you do
an
what you
hour
need to
at
do.
a time,
Yep.
a minute at a time.
And then, you can honor them as whatever you've, I mean, it's
so
I
different.
I feel like for me, it's kind of whatever. I think you put too much pressure on yourself to
make it perfect.
It right, like make a perfect day or do the right thing, honor the right ways. I mean, your life with your kids before, they're messy. I mean, every day's like, it's like just kind of controlled chaos, right? And you don't know what's going to happen, and it's kind of like that afterwards when they're gone. It's just a different sort of chaos, and so you can't expect too much of yourself, but just like, you're gonna get through this day, and however you can do to get through it, that's really all that matters. And then ultimately,
and do what you need to do, right? So, for example, I never work on Andy's birthday, Andy's heaven day. I never work. You were more okay working until I told you you couldn't. And then a few years ago, and that goes back to the communication, right? That goes back to that open communication. Guess what? I can't work those days, and I can't have you work those days. I need you to be able to be with me on those days. And who knows what we do on those days? I mean, sometimes we do nothing. Sometimes we have gone golfing kind of to honor Andy. We have done different things to honor him. We have stayed around in the house all day and done virtually nothing. And it looks different all the time. I think when you put pressure on yourself that you need to do the same thing every time,
like
that's not great. I mean, there are some people that do that, but then I also think then they end up putting so much pressure, and then like you do things outside, and now the weather's bad, and now, oh my word, the weather's bad, I can't do it, and it's like you've ruined something because you didn't do the perfect thing.
I think you don't need to feel like you need a Pinterest grief.
Right.
You don't need to have a project. You don't need to have where you post and show all the amazing things you did to honor someone, to prove that you loved them and cared for them. So don't feel like you need to be like a Pinterest grief, right? And
right.
So
like I need to do this. I need to have a party. I need to invite all his friends or her friends. No, you really don't. You just need to get through the day.
Yep.
And however way feels best for you to get through that day, that's the thing. And it really might. I mean, I have gotten to the point where I will be paralyzed. I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, Andy's birthday is coming up. Do we have a plan for that? Nope. Am I working that day? Nope. In fact, I can't remember which day it is now, which day of the week. Do you remember?
I feel like it's a weekend.
No.
No, it's a Monday.
It's a Monday.
Yeah.
It's a Monday. So I'm not working. And I don't have to work till Wednesday. Oh, you're not working either because I told you couldn't. So, because that's just what we do now. And I have no idea what we'll do. I mean, we'll spend the day together. But who knows how it will look? I don't know how it's going to look.
Yeah, we'll just get done, and then you'll be a lot better the next day.
And then I'll be better Actually, I'll be better 2 days later because the next day I'll be tired.
Well, that's true. And you'll be pretty bad the week leading up to it.
It's actually gotten to the point where clearly my coworkers know this stuff too. So they know I don't work on April 21st. I don't work on August 15th. This year, August 15th, Andy's Heaven Day, is on a Friday. Well, I normally work Thursday evening. And I was planning on just working Thursday evening like normal until the managing partner of my practice said, well, you're not working on Thursday. She said, I need you this other Friday earlier in the month. Can you work that day instead? She didn't need me that badly then, but she knew I was going to be a hot mess the day before because I'm always a hot mess the day before. And honestly, I pretty much always feel like the day before ends up being worse than the actual day.
Oh, no question.
Yes.
I can say that with 100%.
Yes.
You're bad the first hour of the day, and then you're okay after that.
Yeah, but the day before,
yes.
I'm terrible. And to the point where obviously my coworkers know this because she has me not working. So I am working the morning of the 13th, and then I'm not working again until the next Monday. So just to give me time, just to do whatever I need to do, which who knows what that's going to be. I have no idea. So anyway, to the person who submitted that question, just be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace and be kind to yourself all day.
Yeah, just survive. That's all. That's every day is that way.
I know.
I mean, it seems like dumb advice. But
It's
that's
so
really
funny because the person that was just on the podcast last week, she was talking about how when her child died, when her son died, she said to somebody at the hospital, "What am I going to do now?" And she said, "You just got to get up out of the chair. That's all you need to do. If you get up out of the chair today, you did everything you need to do today." And that gave her so much comfort to know I don't really have to do that much. Yeah. And on these big, huge days like that, just tell yourself, I'm going to get up. And that's really my only expectation for the day. All right. Well, we've hit our hour mark. Good job.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to come out of the bullpen for you.
I know, yeah, you're my bullpen guy. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. I hope that you did get something out of this. I am going to have Eric on again. So we are on episode 286 today, as you know, and episode 300 is going to be with Eric again. So we'll have to see if more questions come through to him. Gwen's going to interview us. We'll have something fun going for episode 300 because that's obviously a huge milestone. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.